A chance encounter on a busy highway, a flat tire that would change two lives forever. As Taylor Swift's car limped to the roadside, she never expected the person who would come to her aid. James, a homeless veteran, had been invisible to society for years. But in that moment, his kindness shone brighter than any spotlight. What happened next would shock the nation and redefine the meaning of gratitude. James stood at attention, his posture rigid and proud as he received his military honors. The gleam of the medals against his crisp uniform told a story of valor, sacrifice, and unwavering dedication to his country. In that moment, surrounded by fellow soldiers and beaming family members, James felt invincible. He had no way of knowing that this pinnacle of his career would soon give way to a stark and brutal reality. Fast forward several years, and James's life had taken a drastic turn. The decorated veteran now huddled under a bridge, his weathered hands clutching a tattered backpack containing his few remaining possessions. The contrast between his past glory and current situation was jarring, a testament to the cruel twists of fate that can befall even the most dedicated heroes. James's transition to civilian life had been far from smooth. Like many veterans, he struggled to find his footing in a world that seemed to have moved on without him. The skills that had made him an exemplary soldier didn't easily translate to the job market. Employers praised his service, but hesitated to offer positions, leaving James feeling increasingly isolated and purposeless. The statistics paint a grim picture of veteran homelessness and mental health challenges. According to recent data, over 37,000 veterans experience homelessness on any given night in the United States. Many, like James, grapple with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, depression, and anxiety, often exacerbated by the difficulties of reintegration into civilian society. As James walked along a busy highway, his presence barely registered with passing motorists. He had become invisible, a shadow on the fringes of a society he once swore to protect. The path that led him here was paved with a series of setbacks, each one chipping away at his resilience and hope. It began with the nightmares, vivid, terrifying flashbacks that jolted him awake, drenched in sweat and gasping for air. Sleep became elusive, and with it, his ability to function in day-to-day life. Job interviews turned into disasters as exhaustion and anxiety took their toll. Relationships strained under the weight of his unspoken trauma, pushing away those who might have offered support. Then came the injuries. A car accident, minor for most, aggravated old war wounds. Medical bills piled up, and without steady employment, James found himself drowning in debt. The foreclosure notice on his small apartment felt like a final betrayal. With nowhere else to turn, the streets became his new battlefield. Each step along the highway was a reminder of how far he had fallen. Cars whizzed by, their occupants oblivious to the struggles of the man walking beside them. James's mind drifted to the medals now pawned, the uniform that no longer fit, the life that seemed increasingly like a distant dream. Yet even in his darkest moments, a flicker of the soldier he once was remained. As he trudged forward, his eyes scanned the road ahead, ever vigilant, ever ready to lend a hand if needed. Little did he know that fate was about to present an opportunity that would challenge everything he thought he knew about second chances and the power of human connection. Fate works in mysterious ways. As James approached the stranded vehicle, he couldn't have imagined the impact this simple act of kindness would have. The woman peering anxiously at her flat tire was none other than Taylor Swift. Alone, exposed, and faced with a decision: trust the disheveled stranger or wait for help in an increasingly precarious situation. The sleek black SUV stood out against the dusty shoulder of the highway, its hazard lights blinking urgently in the afternoon sun. Taylor Swift stood beside it, her face a mixture of frustration and concern. She had been on her way to a meeting when the tire blew, leaving her stranded on this busy stretch of road. As a global superstar, she was acutely aware of her vulnerability in this moment. James approached cautiously, his weathered boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. He could see the woman's body language change as she noticed him, her shoulders tensing, her hand instinctively reaching for her phone. It was a reaction he had grown accustomed to, but it still stung. "Excuse me, ma'am," James called out, his voice steady and respectful. "I couldn't help but notice you're having some trouble. I'd be happy to help if you need it." Taylor hesitated, her mind racing. She was used to being surrounded by security, insulated from unexpected encounters. But here she was, alone and in need of assistance. The man before her looked rough around the edges, but there was something in his eyes, a sincerity that made her pause. I've got a flat, Taylor finally responded, gesturing to the tire. I've called for help, but they said it might be a while. James nodded, understanding the subtext. He knew his appearance didn't inspire immediate trust, especially not from someone in Taylor's position. I understand if you'd prefer to wait for professional help, he said, but I served in the military, and changing tires was part of our basic training. I could have you back on the road in no time if you'd like. The mention of military service caught Taylor's attention. She studied James more closely, noticing the way he carried himself despite his disheveled appearance. In that moment, she made a decision that would set in motion a chain of events neither of them could have predicted. You know what? That would be great, Taylor said, a small smile breaking through her earlier apprehension. I'm Taylor, by the way. James, he replied, moving towards the vehicle. It's nice to meet you, Taylor. Let's see what we're dealing with here. As James knelt beside the flat tire, ready to begin work, Taylor watched with a mixture of curiosity and lingering caution. She was aware of the eyes of passing motorists, some slowing down to gawk at the unlikely scene unfolding on the roadside. A homeless veteran and a pop icon, brought together by chance and a faulty tire. Little did either of them know that this encounter would soon captivate the nation, challenging perceptions and sparking conversations about compassion, prejudice, and the unexpected connections that can change lives. As James began to loosen the lug nuts, the first chapter of their shared story was just beginning to unfold. Have you ever judged someone based on their appearance, only to be proven spectacularly wrong? As James set to work on the tire, Taylor was about to learn a powerful lesson about the deceptive nature of first impressions. James's calloused hands moved with a precision that belied his disheveled appearance. His fingers, once accustomed to the weight of a rifle, now deftly maneuvered the lug wrench. The muscle memory of countless vehicle maintenance sessions during his military service kicked in, guiding his movements with an efficiency that caught Taylor off guard. As she watched, a mixture of fascination and lingering wariness played across her face. The man before her, with his worn clothes and weathered features, seemed at odds with the competence he displayed. Taylor found herself torn between her initial apprehension and a growing sense of respect for James's evident skill. James worked methodically, his mind drifting back to his days in basic training. He remembered the sweltering heat of the motor pool, the drill sergeants barking commands as they learned to maintain their vehicles. Back then, the ability to change a tire quickly could mean the difference between mission success and failure. Now, those same skills were bridging an unexpected gap between two worlds. As he loosened each lug nut, James reflected on the irony of his situation. The very abilities that made him an asset in the military now lay dormant in civilian life, overlooked by potential employers who couldn't see past his current circumstances. It was a common plight among veterans, their valuable skills often underutilized in roles that failed to match their training and experience. Taylor's curiosity got the better of her. You seem to really know what you're doing, she ventured, breaking the silence that had settled between them. James glanced up, a hint of pride glimmering in his eyes. Yes, ma'am. Vehicle maintenance was a big part of our training. Never know when you might need to get moving in a hurry out in the field. His words sparked a realization in Taylor. This man, whom society had relegated to the margins, possessed a wealth of knowledge and experience that went far beyond changing tires. She found herself wondering about the other skills hidden beneath the surface, the potential that lay untapped in those who were too often dismissed. As James continued his work, Taylor's posture gradually relaxed. The initial tension in her shoulders eased, replaced by a growing sense of ease in James's presence. She began to see beyond the superficial, recognizing the competence and dignity that radiated from him despite his circumstances. The interaction between them shifted, becoming less about a celebrity and a homeless man, and more about two human beings sharing a moment of connection. Taylor found herself asking questions about James's service, genuinely interested in his experiences and the skills he had acquired. As they talked, neither of them noticed the growing number of curious onlookers. Passers-by slowed their vehicles, some pulling over to watch the unexpected scene unfolding on the roadside. A homeless veteran changing a celebrity's tire was not a sight one encountered every day, and it was about to spark a conversation that would reach far beyond this chance encounter. The scene on the roadside began to shift as passing motorists slowed their vehicles, eyes drawn to the unlikely pair working on the flat tire. What had started as a private moment of connection between James and Taylor was rapidly transforming into an impromptu public spectacle. Cars pulled over to the shoulder, their occupants emerging with phones raised, eager to capture a glimpse of the unfolding drama. The weight of societal judgment descended upon James like a heavy cloak. He could feel the stares boring into his back as he worked, the whispers and pointed fingers, a familiar sensation that he had long ago learned to endure. Some onlookers wore expressions of concern, their brows furrowed as they watched a disheveled man so close to a celebrity. Others displayed open curiosity, clearly struggling to reconcile the scene before them with their preconceived notions of homelessness and fame. As the crowd grew, so did the range of reactions. A middle-aged woman clutched her purse tighter, her eyes darting nervously between James and Taylor. A group of teenagers huddled together, excitedly discussing the possibility of meeting Taylor while casting furtive glances at James. An elderly man nodded approvingly, perhaps recognizing in James's actions an echo of his own past service. The scrutiny was intense, a stark reminder of the stigma that often accompanies homelessness. Studies have shown that public attitudes towards homeless individuals frequently reflect a complex mix of sympathy and judgment, with many viewing them through a lens of misunderstanding and fear. James was acutely aware of how his appearance and circumstances could shape others' perceptions of him, regardless of his actions or character. Despite the growing audience and the palpable tension in the air, James remained focused on the task at hand. His movements were steady and precise, his attention fixed on the tire, as if the gathering crowd didn't exist. Years of enduring public scrutiny had taught him to build a mental fortress against the weight of others' opinions. He worked with quiet determination, his composure a stark contrast to the buzzing energy of the onlookers. Taylor, initially oblivious to the growing spectacle, began to notice the shift in atmosphere. She glanced around, taking in the sea of faces that now surrounded them. A flicker of concern crossed her features as she realized the extent of the attention they had attracted. But as she turned back to James, she was struck by his unwavering focus and calm demeanor. In that moment, Taylor saw beyond the surface once again. James's ability to remain composed under such intense scrutiny spoke volumes about his character and resilience. It was a stark reminder of the daily challenges faced by those experiencing homelessness, who often must navigate a world of judgment and misunderstanding with grace and dignity. As James tightened the last lug nut, the crowd's murmurs grew louder. The simple act of changing a tire had become a powerful statement, challenging perceptions and sparking conversations among the gathered onlookers. Taylor found herself moved by James's quiet strength, recognizing that this chance encounter was evolving into something far more significant than either of them could have anticipated. As the last lug nut clicked into place, Taylor's gaze lingered on James. What lay behind those eyes that had seen so much? She leaned against her car, her curiosity finally overcoming her initial wariness. "James," she began, her voice soft but clear, "how did you end up here?" James paused, his hand still resting on the tire iron. The question hung in the air, heavy with the weight of years of struggle and sacrifice. He took a deep breath, considering how much to reveal. After all, his story wasn't one that usually found sympathetic ears. "It's a long road from where I started," he finally said, his voice low and measured. "I served 2 tours overseas, came back with more than just medals." His eyes met Taylor's, searching for judgment, but finding only attentive interest. Encouraged by her open expression, James continued. He spoke of the pride he felt wearing the uniform, the camaraderie with his fellow soldiers. But as his story unfolded, the darker threads emerged, the nightmares that plagued his sleep, the struggle to find work in a world that seemed to have moved on without him. Taylor listened intently, her perception of James shifting with each word. This wasn't just a homeless man she had encountered by chance. This was a veteran who had given everything for his country, only to find himself lost in the very society he had sworn to protect. The hardest part, James admitted, his voice barely above a whisper, is feeling invisible. People look right through you, like you don't exist. Taylor nodded, a lump forming in her throat. She thought of the times she had averted her eyes from those on the street, never considering the stories they might carry. James's narrative was powerful, challenging her preconceptions and stirring a deep sense of empathy. As their conversation deepened, the tire change neared completion. James worked as he talked, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. Taylor found herself drawn into his world, seeing glimpses of the man he had been and the potential that still resided within him. "What would you do?" Taylor asked, her voice thoughtful, "if you had the chance to start over?" James looked up, surprise flickering across his features. It had been a long time since anyone had asked about his dreams. "I'd want to help other vets," he said after a moment. "Show them they're not alone, that their service still matters." The sincerity in his voice was palpable, and Taylor felt a surge of admiration. Here was a man who had every reason to be bitter, yet still sought to uplift others. She realized that this chance encounter was more than just a flat tire. It was an opportunity to bridge two vastly different worlds. As James tightened the final bolt, their conversation had created a connection that transcended their initial roles of celebrity and stranger. Taylor saw James not as a statistic or a problem to be solved, but as a human being with a rich history and untapped potential. And in that moment, she knew that this encounter would change not just James's life, but her own perspective on compassion and second chances. The final lug nut clicked into place, and James sat back on his heels, a quiet sense of accomplishment settling over him. The tire was changed, but the air between him and Taylor had shifted, charged with an energy neither of them had anticipated. Taylor stood there, her eyes fixed on James, struggling to find the right words to express her gratitude. Thank you," she began, her voice catching slightly. "You have no idea how much this means to me." James nodded, rising to his feet with a grace that belied his weathered appearance. "Happy to help, ma'am," he replied, his tone humble yet tinged with pride. Taylor's mind raced, suddenly aware of the profound impact this simple act of kindness had on her. She had encountered countless fans and industry professionals, but this interaction with James felt different, more genuine. It was a stark reminder of the power of human connection, transcending social barriers and preconceptions. Research has shown that acts of kindness, no matter how small, can have a ripple effect, inspiring others to pay it forward. As Taylor watched James dust off his hands, she felt a strong urge to do more than just offer a verbal thanks. "James," she said, her voice steady now, "I'd like to give you a ride, wherever you need to go." The offer hung in the air, heavy with implications. It wasn't just about transportation, it was an acknowledgement of James's humanity, a gesture that said, "You matter." James hesitated, surprise flickering across his features. He was used to being invisible, to people averting their gaze as they hurried past. This offer of a ride was more than just a kind gesture. It was a bridge between two worlds that rarely intersected. That's very kind of you," he said, his voice low. "But I wouldn't want to impose." Taylor shook her head, a warm smile spreading across her face. "It's not an imposition at all. Please, I insist." As they prepared to leave, both became acutely aware of the growing crowd of onlookers. Phones were out, capturing the unlikely scene of a pop star and a homeless veteran engaged in conversation by the roadside. Whispers rippled through the gathering, a mix of excitement and curiosity. James felt the familiar weight of judgment settling on his shoulders, but it was lightened by Taylor's unwavering presence beside him. She stood tall, her body language clearly indicating that James was with her, not just some stranger she was tolerating. As they walked towards Taylor's car, the crowd parted, creating a path. It was a small gesture, but one that spoke volumes about the power of visibility. James, who had grown accustomed to being unseen, suddenly found himself at the center of attention, not for his circumstances, but for his actions. Taylor opened the passenger door, gesturing for James to enter. It was a simple act, but one loaded with significance. As James hesitated on the threshold of this unexpected turn of events, he felt a glimmer of something he hadn't experienced in years: hope. The onlookers watched in stunned silence as James carefully lowered himself into the passenger seat. Taylor circled around to the driver's side, her movements deliberate and unhurried. As she slid behind the wheel, she knew that this moment was about more than just giving someone a ride. It was about recognizing the inherent worth in every individual, regardless of their circumstances. As the engine purred to life, Taylor and James exchanged a look of mutual understanding. This chance encounter had changed them both, challenging their perceptions and opening their eyes to new possibilities. As they pulled away from the curb, leaving the crowd of onlookers behind, they were embarking on a journey that would ripple far beyond this stretch of highway. In the age of viral content, how much can a single video truly change? As Taylor and James drove away, oblivious to the digital storm brewing behind them, one bystander's quick thinking was about to test the limits of social media's influence on real-world issues. The video, shaky but clear, captured the unlikely scene: Taylor Swift, pop icon and global superstar, helping a disheveled homeless veteran into her car. The 30-second clip spread like wildfire across social media platforms, igniting a firestorm of reactions, debates, and hashtags. Within hours, the video had amassed millions of views. Twitter exploded with trending topics: "Almost your Taylor Swift hero," "You're your homeless veteran," and "second chances" dominated the conversation. On Facebook, the video was shared countless times, each post spawning hundreds of comments ranging from heartfelt praise to skeptical cynicism. The rapid dissemination of the video sparked intense public debate. Some hailed Taylor as a beacon of compassion, praising her for looking beyond appearances and offering help to someone in need. Others questioned her motives, wondering if this was a calculated PR move. The veteran, identified by some as James, became the subject of intense speculation and concern. Across social media platforms, the reactions were as diverse as they were passionate. Instagram users created art pieces inspired by the encounter, while TikTok erupted with reenactments and reaction videos. YouTube commentators dissected every frame of the footage, trying to glean additional context and meaning. The impact of viral videos on social issues is well documented, and this case proved no exception. Homeless advocacy groups reported a surge in donations and volunteer applications. Veterans organizations seized the moment to highlight the ongoing struggles faced by many who have served their country. As the video continued to gain traction, it caught the eye of influential figures and organizations. Celebrities pledged support, politicians called for action, and major corporations announced initiatives to address veteran homelessness. The simple act of kindness captured on a bystander's phone had ballooned into a national conversation about compassion, veterans' rights, and societal responsibility. But amidst the digital frenzy, a question loomed: how would this newfound attention affect James? As millions debated and dissected his story online, he remained unaware of his sudden fame. While the internet buzzed with speculation about his past and future, James continued his daily struggle on the streets, oblivious to the fact that his life was about to change dramatically. The viral spread of the video highlighted the double-edged nature of social media's power. It had the potential to bring much-needed attention to important issues and inspire real-world action. Yet it also raised concerns about privacy, consent, and the ethics of turning personal moments into public spectacles. As the day wore on, the video's reach extended beyond social media. News outlets picked up the story, adding another layer of visibility to James and Taylor's encounter. Reporters scrambled to uncover more details, seeking interviews with witnesses and experts on homelessness and veterans affairs. The digital wildfire showed no signs of slowing down. Each hour brought new developments, new voices joining the chorus of reactions. What had started as a simple act of kindness on a busy highway had morphed into a cultural moment, challenging perceptions and sparking conversations about empathy, social responsibility, and the power of individual actions to inspire widespread change. While millions debated her motives online, Taylor Swift faced an unexpected challenge. The spotlight that had always been her ally now cast harsh shadows, threatening to overshadow the very cause she sought to champion. Could she navigate the treacherous waters of celebrity activism without losing sight of James? Taylor paced the length of her studio, phone clutched tightly in her hand. The plush carpet muffled her footsteps, but it couldn't quiet the storm of thoughts in her mind. The encounter with James had affected her deeply, stirring something beyond mere sympathy. She felt a responsibility, a burning need to do more than just offer a ride and a kind word. Her team had already briefed her on the viral video and the ensuing media frenzy. Taylor knew that every move she made now would be scrutinized, analyzed, and judged. The pressure was immense, but it only strengthened her resolve. This wasn't about publicity or image. It was about making a real difference in James's life and shining a light on the broader issue of veteran homelessness. With determined fingers, Taylor dialed the number of a respected veterans support organization. As she waited for the call to connect, she reflected on the complexities of celebrity-driven, charitable initiatives. She was acutely aware of the pitfalls: accusations of self-promotion, the risk of oversimplifying complex issues, the danger of inadvertently causing harm despite good intentions. The conversation with the organization's director was long and detailed. Taylor listened intently, asking questions and taking notes. She learned about comprehensive case management programs that had successfully helped veterans transition out of homelessness. These initiatives provided not just housing, but also mental health support, job training, and ongoing assistance tailored to each individual's needs. As the call progressed, a plan began to take shape in Taylor's mind. She envisioned a multifaceted approach: immediate support for James, coupled with a broader awareness campaign about veteran homelessness. She would use her platform to amplify the voices of experts and organizations already doing crucial work in this field. The challenge lay in balancing public attention with James's privacy and dignity. Taylor was determined to avoid turning his story into a spectacle. She wanted to create lasting change, not just a fleeting moment of viral fame. This would require careful coordination, respect for James's wishes, and a commitment to long-term support beyond the initial media buzz. As she ended the call, Taylor felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. The wheels of change were beginning to turn, but the road ahead was fraught with potential pitfalls. She knew that her involvement would bring intense scrutiny, not just to herself, but to James and the issue of veteran homelessness as a whole. Taylor took a deep breath, steeling herself for the work ahead. This wasn't about crafting a perfect public image or generating positive headlines. It was about using her influence to create tangible, meaningful change in James's life, and hopefully in the lives of many others facing similar struggles. As she prepared to make her next move, Taylor couldn't help but wonder how James was faring. Amidst the growing media storm, little did she know that their paths were about to intersect once again, in a way that would challenge both of them and potentially reshape the national conversation about homelessness and veteran support. As the first rays of sunlight touched the pavement, James awoke to a world he no longer recognized. The familiar corners of his makeshift home were now surrounded by a sea of unfamiliar faces and flashing cameras. News vans lined the street, their satellite dishes reaching skyward like metallic flowers. The story of James and Taylor's chance encounter had ignited a firestorm of local and national interest, thrusting the once invisible veteran into an uncomfortable spotlight. James blinked, his eyes adjusting to the sudden intrusion of light and noise. Reporters jostled for position, their microphones thrust forward like eager hands. He could hear snippets of their chatter, words like homeless hero and swift savior floating on the morning air. The attention was overwhelming, a stark contrast to the anonymity he had grown accustomed to over the years. As James cautiously emerged from his makeshift shelter, he was met with a barrage of questions and flashing cameras. The sudden visibility was jarring, and he found himself longing for the invisibility that had been both his burden and his shield. Yet amidst the chaos, he noticed something else: faces in the crowd that weren't holding cameras or notepads, but rather wore expressions of genuine concern and interest. The community's response to James's story was swift and multifaceted. Local businesses stepped forward with offers of temporary housing and job opportunities. Veterans organizations mobilized, reaching out with promises of support and resources. Even schools in the area had begun organizing donation drives, collecting essentials for James and others in similar situations. This outpouring of support reflected a growing trend in community-driven initiatives to combat homelessness. Recent studies had shown that when communities rallied around individuals like James, the impact could be significant. In fact, areas with strong community engagement programs had seen up to a 25% reduction in chronic homelessness over the past 5 years. As the day wore on, James found himself at the center of a whirlwind of activity. Social workers arrived, offering guidance and assistance in navigating the sudden influx of support. A local shelter reached out with an offer of immediate housing, a clean bed, and hot meals. A veteran support group presented him with information on job training programs and mental health services. The wave of support was both heartening and overwhelming. James felt a mix of gratitude and apprehension as he considered the possibilities unfolding before him. After years of struggle and invisibility, could this truly be the turning point he had long ceased hoping for? As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the now crowded street, James took his first tentative steps towards accepting help. He agreed to meet with a caseworker, to spend the night in a proper bed at the shelter, to consider the job training program. Each decision felt monumental, a step away from survival mode and towards a life he had almost forgotten was possible. The transition wouldn't be easy. Years of living on the streets had left their mark, both physically and emotionally. Trust didn't come easily, and the habits of survival were deeply ingrained. Yet as James settled into his temporary bed that night, clean and fed for the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt a flicker of something he had long thought extinguished: hope. As he drifted off to sleep, James couldn't help but wonder what the coming days would bring. The journey ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and potential setbacks. But for the first time in years, he wasn't facing it alone. A community had awakened, and with it, the possibility of a new chapter in James's life had begun to unfold. The mirror reflected a face James barely recognized. His trembling hands fumbled with the crisp collar of his new shirt, a stark contrast to the tattered layers he'd worn for years. The shelter's bathroom was small but clean, a far cry from the public restrooms he'd relied on for so long. As he straightened his posture, James took a deep breath, steeling himself for the day ahead. The journey of rehabilitation and reintegration had been far from easy. Each day brought new challenges, testing James's resolve and the coping mechanisms he'd developed on the streets. The structure of the support programs felt alien at first, a jarring shift from the chaotic rhythm of homelessness. Group therapy sessions left him raw and exposed, while job training workshops reminded him of skills long dormant. James's caseworker, Sarah, had become a steady presence in his life. Her gentle encouragement and unwavering support helped him navigate the complex web of services available to veterans. She'd explained the statistics. Programs like the one James was enrolled in had shown a 75% success rate in helping veterans secure stable housing. But numbers were cold comfort in the face of nightmares that still plagued his sleep and the anxiety that gripped him in crowded spaces. As weeks turned into months, James found himself making progress, albeit slowly. The job training program had rekindled his interest in mechanics, a skill he'd honed during his military service. His hands, once used to clutching a worn backpack, now deftly manipulated engine parts. The sense of purpose that came with productive work was both exhilarating and terrifying. The search for permanent housing proved to be another hurdle. James worked closely with the Veterans Affairs Supportive Housing (DVASH) program, which combined housing assistance with ongoing support services. The process was often frustrating, filled with paperwork and waiting, but the promise of a place to call his own kept James motivated, even on the darkest days. Throughout his journey, James found unexpected allies. Fellow veterans in the program became a source of strength and understanding. They shared stories of their own struggles and triumphs, creating a bond forged in shared experiences. Local community members, inspired by James's story, offered encouragement and practical support. A small auto repair shop even offered him a part-time position, a tentative step back into the workforce. As months passed, James's hard work began to bear fruit. The day he signed the lease on a small apartment felt surreal. Standing in the empty space, keys in hand, he was overwhelmed by a mix of pride and trepidation. The VASH program ensured he'd have continued support, but the responsibility of maintaining a home after years on the streets was daunting. Securing full-time employment was the final piece of the puzzle. When the auto shop offered him a permanent position, James felt a surge of emotion he couldn't quite name. It was more than just relief or happiness. It was a sense of reclaiming a part of himself he thought was lost forever. Now, as James adjusted his collar one last time, he saw more than just his reflection in the mirror. He saw the long road he'd traveled, the challenges he'd overcome, and the community that had rallied around him. The man staring back at him was changed, scarred but stronger. As he stepped out of the bathroom, ready to face another day, James felt a familiar stirring in his chest, the desire to help others who were still struggling, to pay forward the kindness that had changed his life. James eased his car to a stop, the familiar sight of a stranded motorist stirring memories of his own past. A middle-aged woman stood beside her vehicle, frustration etched on her face as she stared at a flat tire. For a moment, James hesitated. The comfort of his new life beckoned, urging him to drive on. But something stronger took hold, a sense of duty, of empathy born from his own struggles. He stepped out, his work boots crunching on the gravel. "Need a hand?" he called, his voice steady and kind. The woman's relief was palpable as she nodded gratefully. As James knelt beside the tire, his mind drifted back to that pivotal day when Taylor Swift had shown him kindness. He remembered the weight of judgment, the feeling of invisibility that had shadowed him for so long. Now, as he worked, James felt a profound sense of purpose. Research had shown that acts of kindness not only benefited the recipient, but also improved the mental health and well-being of the giver. James experienced this firsthand, a warmth spreading through his chest as he tightened the last lug nut. Standing up, he dusted off his hands and smiled at the woman. "All set," he said, satisfaction evident in his voice. As he drove away, James reflected on the full circle his life had taken. From a man in need to one who could offer help, he realized the true power of compassion. One small act of kindness had changed his life, and now he had the opportunity to pay it forward, creating a ripple effect of goodwill in a world that sorely needed it.